All right, so this is a continuation of 7.2 volume for calculus. If you haven't seen the first video to see how this formula works, go ahead and check it out. But we are working with the same exact formula. Okay, pi times the integral. C is the line that we are rotating around. Capital R is the function furthest from what we're rotating around. And lowercase r is the function closest to the line of rotation. And there's a squared on both of those, okay? Remember, if we are rotating around an axis is x or y equals 0, so this disappears with the negative. And then if there's only one function, then this whole second part disappears, okay? So in my class, we came up with a short-term way of memorizing when it's rotating side to side and up and down, okay? So here are the notes. If you didn't get to see our literal dance moves in class, it may not make as much sense, but let's try through video. So the easy questions is when you are revolving around y equals a number or the x-axis, because the x-axis is y equals 0, okay? So what I circled in red is what would be given to let you know whether you're doing what we call a white girl or a rolling. Okay, so if the question says revolving around y equals a number, the rotation happens like this, right? Around some number, vertically. So we called it a white girl because when you make your hands parallel and you start rolling them, you look like you're dancing like a white girl. These are the easy questions because everything stays in terms of x. Your a and b are x values, and your equations, which usually come in terms of x, y equals with x's, can stay as is. And then your integral, you plug in your equations with x's, you plug in your a and b, and you would have a dx because it is in terms of x. Now, if they ever give you that it is revolving around x equals a number or the y-axis, because the y-axis is x equals to 0, then your function starts rotating horizontally. These questions are definitely much more difficult. So we talked about the rolly dance where your hands kind of like spin. These are more difficult because now when I solve for my a and b, they're going to be y values. And my equations, which are usually given to me as y equals with x's, I have to rearrange to read as x equals functions of y. So I have a few extra steps here. And then once I have those a's and b's and equations in terms of y, I can plug them in, and then my integral will read dy. So what I'm going to show you in this video is one image and the 4 different ways it could rotate. Okay, if you watch this video, you will see the 4 different ways a volume rotating could be asked. All right, so I'm going to give you one image and we're going to do 4 different questions to it. All right, so here's our question. It says, find the region bounded by y equals 2x squared, y equals 0, and x equals 0. And then the first question I'm going to ask you is specifically revolving around the x-axis. If I'm revolving around, the y-axis. If I'm revolving around the y-axis, who is my C? C is x equals 0. Okay, is this a rolly or a white girl? This is a rolly. This is a hard question, okay? So I'm going to start off by drawing the graph. What is the graph of 2x squared? A parabola, right? Let me change colors. And what does that 2 do to the parabola? It just makes it stretch, okay? And then the next one they say they're going to close this off with is y equals 0, which is? It's the x-axis, right? Y equals 0 is like this. And then also with x equals 2. So it's a vertical line like this, okay? So the enclosed area just ends up being this portion in the first quadrant. You see it? Okay? So this exact image is going to appear in every single of the 4 examples that we do today. What's different is who I'm going to be rotating around. I want to rotate around x equals 0, which is the y-axis. Okay? All right, so if you're good with the graph, our next step is going to be to find A and B. So we said when it's a Rolly, my A and my B have to be Y values. Can you guys tell what my A is going to be? Right, my A is going to be 0 because it closes off at the x-axis. And now my B, I know that this is 1 and this is 2. I need to find out what this Y value is. How can I find out what that Y value is? This is 2 comma blank. Very nice. Plug in 2 into the function. So I could say Y equals 2 times 2 squared. So again, I'm plugging 2 into the parabola function. And what number do you get there? 8. And that's my A to B in terms of Y. So I have 8 here, and then I have 0 down here. Okay? The next thing that I have to do is make my equations in terms of Y. Okay? So if I'm rotating around here, who is going to be my lowercase r? The parabola, right? What the problem with my parabola, so my lowercase r is my parabola, which is y equals 2x squared. The problem with that right now is that because this is a Rolly, I need the equation to be read in terms of y. So I need this x by itself and the equations to have y's. So what I'm going to do next is divide by 2 and then square root. So I could say x equals the square root of y over 2. Okay, and this is my lowercase r. And now, who is the, oops, I did it in the wrong color. Who is, from my line of rotation, who is the furthest function? Who's my capital R? X equals 2. So do you see I have a lowercase r with x equals and y's, and now I have a capital R with x equals, this doesn't happen to have a y, but does that make sense? Once you're done here, you are literally done with the hardest part. It is analyzing and understanding who's who. Okay? So now I can set up my equation, which is pi times the integral from a to b, from 0 to 8, of c, who's my c? Minus capital R squared minus c, which is 0, minus lowercase r squared. And then because this is in terms of y, I need to write dy. Okay? So remember when you do not have a c, the 0 and the negative cancel? The negative also cancels because if I square a negative, it turns positive. Okay? So now I have pi times the integral from 0 to 8 of 2 squared, which is minus, what does a square root and a square do to each other? They cancel, and then I'm going to write, instead of y over 2, I'm going to put half y, dy. And now hopefully this feels like the easy part. It's a very nice, easy antiderivative. All right, so I dropped down my pi. Antiderivative of 4. Be careful not to put 4x. Remember, we are in terms of y. Minus, add 1, which would make it y squared, and divide by that 2, which would make it 1 over 4. And this goes from 0 to 8. So pi times the function at b minus the function at a, which in this case is just 0. And then you are done here. Okay? Remember that this is sufficient for an FRQ. If you're an AP and this was a multiple choice question, you'd have to finish cleaning this. So for part B, we're going to do the exact same question. Okay? So find the region bounded by these 3, which I drew those 3. Okay? So right now, this sentence in this image is identical to the last question we just did. What's going to change is who I'm revolving around. Okay? So I'm revolving around the x-axis. What is my C? Y equals 0. So this is a white girl. This is an easy question. Okay? So that means what I'm revolving around is right here. Okay? Good up to there? So now, if it's white girl revolving this way, my limitations, my A and B, are X's. They're on the side. So this one's actually pretty easy to see. Who is my A? 0. It closes off right here at the origin at 0. And where does it close off on the right? Very easy to see, right? Told you, white girl questions are a lot easier. Now, put your pencil on your line of rotation. My line of rotation is 0. If I draw toward the bounded region, what is the first function I hit? The parabola. So, do I have another function that I hit within the bounded region? Do you see that there's no other function that I hit? Technically, if you wanted to count a second function, your second function is your 0. So I only have one function, which is my parabola, and it is y equals 2x squared. Okay? So not only is this a white girl question, not only were my A's and B's really easy to see, but I only have one function, and in white girl, the function needs to be y equals with x's, and it's already like that. Sorry for the bell. So we are ready to go straight to our setup. This is why white girl questions are so easy, because analyzing the graph is much simpler. So I have pi times the integral from 0 to 2 of c, who is c? 0, minus my function, which is 2x squared. And then technically, I don't need to write the next 0 minus r because there is no second function. I'm going to write it here, but you do not have to write that part. And this is in terms of x, so I write dx. So this entire portion is not needed, and this portion is not needed. So I was just asked the question if we can count y equals 0 as one of our functions. The truth is you can, okay? But anytime one of your functions is the same as your line of rotation, you would have put that second function here, and those two numbers cancel out anyways. So whenever one of your functions is the same as your line of rotation, this second part cancels out. So now I keep on with my integral. Be careful here. We don't need a negative. 2x squared gives me? Good. Make sure you square the 2 as well. So the 2 gets squared, and so does the x squared. So I get 4x to the 4th. And the rest cancels out, and I have dx. Drop down the pi. Antiderivative. From 0 to 2. And then the function at b minus my function at a. And again, that's your end for an F, R, Q. All right, so for this next question, again, same exact setup, same exact functions, same exact image. The difference now is that I'm revolving around y equals 8. So this right here is my C. If it's y equals a number, is this a Rolly or a white girl? This is a white girl. Y equals a number is a white girl. Think, why did I date that white girl? Okay, so this is going to be an easy question. Now, we saw from when we did part A, we already found what this point right here was, right? What was that point? It was 2, 8. Okay? So when they say that I'm revolving around y equals 8, let me do it in red. It means they want me to revolve around this part. Okay? So, let's start off with my A and B. A's and B's will be x values determined by the left and right. What is closing off the left side? 0. And what is closing off the right side? 2. Very easy. Remember, white girls should be easy. So now, if I put my pencil on the line of rotation and I start drawing downward towards my bounded region, which is the first function that I hit? The parabola. That's the closest one. That is my r. My lowercase r, I'm sorry. So my lowercase r is my parabola. And in white girl questions, I want to leave my functions with y equals x's. So I'm good. That's why the white girl questions are easier, because you can leave the functions as is. Now, as I draw, put my pencil on the line of rotation, who is the second function that I hit? Good. So my capital R is 0. All right. Once you know this bit of information, you are ready to set up your integral. So I have pi times the integral from 0 to 2 of c. Who's my c? Good. So I have 8 minus capital R. What's my big R? Be careful, big R. 0 squared minus c, which is 8, minus my little r, which is, good, 2x squared. And I write dx because this is in terms of x. So I'm going to drop down my pi. 8 minus 0 is still 8. So here I'm only concerned about 8 squared. And 8 squared is 64 minus, I'm going to have to FOIL this portion. Okay? So before I can plug all of this in here, I have to say 8 minus 2x squared times 8 minus 2x squared. Okay? And this should give me okay? Now I need to leave this parentheses here because that negative is going to have to get distributed. Okay, so I should write 64 minus 32x squared plus 4x to the fourth. I apologize. My students just made me realize that I forgot to keep writing my integral sign. I have not done the antiderivative yet, okay? So now at this point, which is what is probably one of the most common mistakes that happens on the AP test, is forgetting this parenthesis, so people forget to distribute this negative all the way through, okay? All right, so now pi times the integral from 0 to 2 of 64 minus 64 plus 32x squared minus 4x to the fourth, okay? Now these two are going to, I know this looks really crazy, but check this out. These two cancel, and now my antiderivative is actually pretty short, okay? So antiderivative here, I add one, so it is x cubed, and now I have 32 over 3, good, minus, this becomes an x to the fifth, and I divide that 4 by 5, exactly. And I have 0 to 2. There's my function at b, minus my function at a would just be 0. And I am done here. This would be your answer for an FRQ. If you're in AP and it was multiple choice, you would have to finish. Okay? So for our last example, we're going to see the same exact image, right? We're still using the same three functions, the same exact image. But now we are revolving around x equals 2. So when I revolve around x equals a number, this is a Rolly. So this is a hard one. This is probably the worst one we'll see because it is a Rolly, and then my C is not a 0, so that won't cancel out. Okay, so this is, again, probably going to be the tougher one we'll see. So according to the questions that we did earlier, we already did the work to find out what this point was. What was this point here? 8. Okay, and now I am revolving around x equals 0. So what I'm sorry, not 0. X equals 2. So I am revolving around this guy. We see that? Okay. So that 2 is my line of rotation. So if I am going Rolly and I'm rotating this way, horizontally, that means my bottom and top need to be bounded by y values. So who is my A? Good, my A is 0. And my B, what's the highest it can go? Is to 8, okay? So now, if I put my pencil on my line of rotation and I draw towards the bounded region, what function do I hit? The parabola, right? So the parabola is y equals 2x squared. Do I hit any other function? No, so that is my only r. And again, like we saw earlier in this video, if one of my functions is the same as my line of rotation, that technically counts as my little r, and it'll end up canceling out. Okay? So remember that in Rolli's, my equations need to be x equals and the function in terms of y. We already did this work earlier, but I'm going to do it one more time really quick. Isolate that x. Okay? So this is really the function that I'm going to have to use. So I set up pi times the integral from a to b of my c, which is 2, minus my function, which is square root. I'm going to write of half of y. Okay? This is the same as saying square root of half of y. Squared. And then just to show you in case you didn't catch, my c is 2, and my second function, closest, is just, whoops, I put 2 lines, is also 2. Right, so if you did count that other one as your second r, it cancels out, or you can count it as not having a second r. Okay? And again, this is with respect to y, so it is dy. So my next step is going to be to clean this inside. It's going to be some pretty ugly foiling, but take it with a grain of salt. In the AP test, they don't even make you do that much algebra. Okay, this is just a textbook question. So I really have 2 minus square root of half y times 2 minus square root of half y. That foils out to like that. Then these two combine and have 4 minus 4. I'm going to write this as a 1/2 y to the 1/2 because I know I'm going to end up having to do some reverse power rule here. Okay, drop my dy, drop my integral, and drop my pi. So I did 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times this negative radical is one of them, and then it happens again here. And then when I multiply these two radicals, the radicals cancel, and it becomes positive. I combine the two middle terms to be -4, and I just wrote my radical as a 1/2 to make it easy to do the power rule. Okay? Now, why this continues to be ugly is because when I do reverse power rule here, I have a u sub going on. Okay? So this one's going to be easy, and this one's going to be easy. This one here, my u is half y, which makes my u prime just half. Okay? So treat it like if you're missing a 2. Okay? So what is that 2 times that 4 that I'm missing? I'm sorry, missing a half, so I'm going to write a 2. Okay? Which means I need to put a 2 on the outside of that integral, but it only applies to this one. Okay, so I'm going to multiply a 2 there. So now I have 8. Now I can finish this integral. Okay? Which the antiderivative here would be to add 1 to the outside, which would make this 3 over 2, and then multiply by the reciprocal. So I paused really quick. I had my students ask me to show a more detailed explanation of the u sub. I put it here on this post-it. Okay? So I'll put it right here really quick. So just so you can follow, I pulled out the -4 from the integral. Remember, you are allowed to integrate a single term, okay? I did my u sub. I saw that the 1/2 was missing, so I applied the 2 on the outside. This becomes my du. I write things in terms of u. The -4 and the 2 multiply. Do my antiderivative, okay? And then I put the u back in. So if you need to pause the video really quick and recap that, that is why that u sub ends up as a -16 over 3 times a half y to the 3 over 2. Okay? So now I can't forget to do the antiderivative of these two. So what is the antiderivative of 4 with respect to y? So it's 4y minus this term plus the antiderivative of half y. Good. So the y's exponent becomes a 2 and the coefficient becomes 1 over 4. Bring down my pi. And this goes from 0 to 8. Okay? We have to go one more step to the f of b minus f of a, and then you can leave it as is. For those of you taking AP, remember, once you finish your f of b minus f of a, as long as it does not have an ln, an e, or a trig function, you are done. If it does have one of those, you do have to complete that portion. And of course, if one of your parentheses are just off slightly, it will be marked wrong on an AP test, okay? What you need to prove is that you can give the correct value no matter how messy, but your parentheses and brackets do have to be on. For example, I've had a student before that forgets these last brackets, which means that the pi only applies to this term here. And if your f of a was something different, it would be wrong. So be very careful, okay? And this again would be your FRQ, your free response answer. If it was multiple choice, you would have to finish.